Welcome viewers, welcome to this episode of Spotlight. The world watches in horror as the tragedy in Gaza continues to unfold. In a harrowing escalation, the Israeli entity backed by its staunch ally, the U.S., has shattered the fragile ceasefire, unleashing a torrent of violence that has already claimed the lives of some 420 Gazans, the majority of whom are children and women sleeping in the early hours. Yet the international community remains largely silent. This massacre starkly illustrates a profound disregard for human life and highlights an urgent call for global accountability and intervention now more than ever. As we explore the ramifications of these actions, we must confront a grim reality of humanitarian crisis that demands our immediate attention and action. Now is the time for all voices to rise and be heard, advocating for justice in the face of overwhelming oppression. We'll begin our discussion right after this report.
The Israeli military has resumed its deadly airstrikes on Gaza after it announced the end of a ceasefire agreement with Hamas. The fresh airstrikes have targeted Palestinian homes and civilian structure across the besieged territory. Hundreds of Palestinians, including women and children, have been killed and many more injured. According to a White House spokesperson, Israel's new attacks on Gaza have been launched in coordination with the U.S.
The Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight.
A senior Hamas official has said the confirmation of previous consultations between Washington and Tel Aviv indicates the U.S. direct complicity in this aggression. The people in Gaza are among many around the world voicing frustration at the United States' unflinching support for Israel.
The United States supported them at the start of the war, and now it is supporting Israel one more time. They have people fled from the south to stay here in Gaza City, but they found tents. There are no houses. They bombed us last night, and people rushed to the streets in the middle of the night. The martyrs couldn't even be buried. No one knew who would bury them.
What do they want from the wounded and devastated people of Gaza? The U.S. supports Israel with all kinds of military equipment available in the Middle East and in its stockpiles. We have become a testing ground in Gaza for Israeli-American strikes. We just want to understand from them, what do they want from us?
Where can we go?
Enjoying the backing of the United States, the Tel Aviv regime pressed for the return of the remaining captives in exchange for a longer-term truce. However, Hamas insisted on moving on with the negotiations aimed at a permanent end to the war and a full withdrawal of Israeli forces under the terms of the original ceasefire agreement. Despite all its peace effort claims, Washington has done nothing to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians. It rather fanned the flames of the genocidal war against them.
Well, now I'd like to welcome my guest who will be joining us for this episode. Mr. Eric Wahlberg, author and journalist, joining us from Toronto. And Mr. Salah Ibn-Shath, author and commentator, joining us from Belfast. Well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us in this special episode of Gaza War Reignited. I do want to start off actually with Mr. Shath. Mr. Shath, I'd like to start with this fragile ceasefire. Now, as we know, it was initiated and, of course, taken credit by the U.S. under the Donald Trump administration. They set the number of phases, they set the conditions, what is to be agreed upon and by whom, and then after it was implemented, they upped their financial and military aid to the Israeli entity, and now, just at the end of the first phase ending, they gave the green light to actually break that same ceasefire as they massacred entire families in their sleep. I mean, what kind of mediation is this?
It's from the beginning, I think, I said myself at the time when the Zionist declared accepted ceasefire terms, that is was prepared and as a gift for the incoming new president from his mate, his friend Netanyahu, as to show Trump is a strong president and he's capable of imposing his will internationally. And then after a few days in Trump, he started declaring to the Palestinians if you don't release the prisoners midday at 12 o'clock, all hell will be let loose on you. And the same thing is when he directed his threat, the psychological warfare on the Palestinians and the region by trying to ethnically cleanse 2 million Palestinians out of Gaza. All of that is a kind of indication of what is the Trump administration is about and what is Netanyahu. This administration said itself it was informed a night ahead before the Zionist aggression, and it was green-lighted these crimes. So that in its own is, are complicit in what this entity is doing in the Gaza Strip. It's committing genocide. You are enabling this entity of committing genocide. You are not a mediator in here. And we've seen as well lately, this ceasefire was signed by the American administration, and then it was a fulfillment as well of a demand by United Nations Security Council resolution to asking the Zionist entity to cease fire and to allow aids in. And this ceasefire was over 3 stages. The first stage is done, and then the Americans started with the Israelis about saying, no, it's time for releasing all prisoners, while the Palestinian resistance fulfilled all the demands of all the first stage, didn't break any of the conditions. We see in the Israelis what they did. They stopped releasing prisoners. They stopped now for nearly 16, 17 days, not allowing aids in after. And now this is a huge, over 100 F-35 stealth airplanes attacking tents and killing families and killing
yes, Mr. Shah, I'm going to stop you right there and take something very important that you didn't mention. I'm going to go ahead and cross over to Mr. Wahlberg. I'd like to thank you very much for being patient with us, Mr. Wahlberg. Our guest, Mr. Shah, mentioned how Hamas has indeed carried out all of the cases and everything, all the conditions required from them during the ceasefire, while in response, of course, we saw the Israeli entity basically on daily violations. Some say that the resistance is the only solution for Palestinians to actually be freed. No negotiations, no ceasefire, and as we have seen from the U.S.-backed Israeli entity, they never have and they never will abide. Do you agree with this?
Yes, the idea of negotiations, it's so one-sided. There is no mediator here. There is just U.S. Israel versus the Palestinians. There's no one in between. No, Trump and Netanyahu will not take anyone interfering with the process of taking over all of Palestine. I mean, that's what the intent is. It always has been the intent. And negotiations are really a ruse, just to cover for delaying and perhaps getting some hostages back, these kinds of temporary needs to meet the protests of Israelis themselves, the families of the hostages. So, yeah, and this is really part of a whole process of Netanyahu is purging his cabinet, his fellow genociders. Shin Bet, the head of he just dismissed the head of Shin Bet, which is non-constitutional, but he's basically acting as a dictator and getting away with it. If you just keep pushing ahead, Trump and Netanyahu are following a similar path. Trump's doing a similar kind of destruction of American society and ignoring the Constitution there. Netanyahu's doing that and to pursue this narrow focus on eliminating the Palestinians. That's what really comes down to. So the only thing that Hamas can do is to be following exactly what is agreed, but that's never going to be enough because it's a turkey shoot. Really, Israel just goes in and kills whoever it wants, and no one stops it. So I don't really know what the options are for Hamas at this point.
Exactly. And as you're mentioning there, Mr. Wahlberg, I'm going to cross over back to Mr. Schath. Yeah. Mr. Schath, Mr. Wahlberg mentioned that there's no one here other than the U.S. and the Israeli entity from negotiations to actually implementing the ceasefire. People have actually been calling, as we know and as we have always heard, on the international community. They're always a figure here that people call on to intervene and reduce the suffering of the Palestinians. But history has shown us time and time again that the only response we get from these international communities is basic silence. And even today, we have the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, actually appealing for the remaining captives to be released unconditionally. What about the thousands of Palestinians that are still being imprisoned and tortured in the Israeli jails? Let's remind our viewers that we do have children there as young as 12 actually being held there. I mean, where is the international community? They're still silent. So what about the Palestinians' rights?
Since October 7th, 23, there is over 30,000 Palestinians being kidnapped in Gaza and the West Bank, and nobody talks about them. The way the Palestinian prisoners see their torture in there, they've been tortured, sexually abused and raped, even raped by dogs and animals, being attacked, some of them forced disappeared, some being killed, doctors being killed who's been taken from hospital to admit. There is, like in Shifa Hospital, when they didn't find bunker after the Shifa Hospital, Dr. Salmiya, they broke his arms and legs and put leash on his neck and made him eat like a dog to extract a confession from him that there was a bunker under the Shifa Hospital. So despite all of that, the Palestinian resistance knows very well today who they are facing. This is an ongoing process from 1917 till today, from the British occupation of Palestine and handing it over to terror outfits they brought from West Europe and East Europe and give them Palestine as a state and call it now the Israeli Defense Army. And this state, from that, with the British and with the Americans today, and as well the other European forces, trying to genocide, sometimes in a slow rate and sometimes in a high speed, like after the 7th of October of the Palestinians, to ethnically cleanse. But the Palestinians are stubborn people and adamant to stay in their land. Today, there is over 7.2 million Palestinians within historical Palestine and Gaza, and there is less than that Jewish and Zionist entity resident in there. So the stubbornness of the Palestinian, even with the enormous human cost, showed that the resistance, even with the wars, which is started from 2008 on Gaza or till today, it showed the resilience and the resistance, and it's very difficult for the Zionist entity to achieve its goals. Today we hear Netanyahu coming to us as they want to total victory, and this claim and total victory, which the Palestinian proved, it broke that army, which that army, when lost the deterrence balance and capability in the region, we seen the West rushed, led by Biden at the time, and then the British, the German, the French, all to support the Zionist entity to stand on its feet. We're talking about a few thousand Palestinian resistance fighters shot that supposed to be superpower, yes, regional superpower, the Zionist entity, a nuclear power. The Palestinian people are capable of facing the Zionist entity. The problem is the West, it's in history from the taking over of North America or Rhodesia or white South Africa. They commit genocide against unarmed people, defenseless people, and this is what they commit in Palestine with their Zionist entity.
Exactly, Mr. Schacht. I mean, obviously, the resistance there in Palestine has proven more than enough that they are capable after 15 months of genocide with, like you mentioned, the U.S. backing them, finance, military aid. They were able to withstand it, and definitely their steadfastness will continue. Mr. Wahlberg, I do want to direct this question to you as being a journalist. We know that Gazans have been through a lot. They've been through bombings, through missiles, through displacement, starvation, actually being emotionally ripped apart from losing all their family members, children being orphaned. They've been through this and much more. How can people around the world still continue to turn a blind eye? I mean, are there certain media outlets helping in this regard, in your opinion?
Well, the Western media is basically Jewish controlled, and it's Western diaspora Jews who are fanatically pro-Israel, though they don't want to live there. They don't want to put up with the horrors of actually living in Israel, but they want it there. So they just insist that the lies are made public and no one can speak against it. And leadership is 100% pro-Israeli. My only understanding of world politics now is if you become rich, then you become pro-Israel and you support this Jewish genocide, because Jews are the symbol, the world symbol for wealth, for smarts in becoming millionaires, billionaires, that's ingrained in us. And it's true, in fact, that's where all of their efforts go. So you support that if you want to be rich. And that's what the West is built on. The West is built on becoming rich. And so we're stuck with that kind of model, which is a horrible model. But it's interesting that there still is humanity underneath that. Most people don't really care to become rich. Most people just want a simple, ordinary life. And those people, the masses, they are pro-Palestine, uniformly, really. But they're not strongly pro-Palestine. People are concerned more about their own ability to survive, and they are narrowly focused. I see this in my own family, that they really, even though they're nice people, they're Christians, and I appeal to them to help. No, I've got 2 properties, I've got to look after them. You know, this kind of narrow mentality that you don't try to reach out and help when you see genocide happening. To me, it's like in the 1930s, and back then, apparently the West was the same kind of nonchalant, ignoring the genocide that was approaching and coming to pass against the Jews then, but against communists, against Russians. That mentality of just ignore, it's bad, but there's nothing we can do, so just ignore it and live your simple life. So I don't know, we have to, the fact that there is this genocide now, we have to really push and try and motivate the public so that they will push against the leaders and really bring some kind of real democracy. We don't have democracy. We have oligarchy controlling us and shaping our minds. So we've got to somehow move beyond that.
Yes, so Mr. Schacht, I'm going to bring in what our guest to talk about this mentality that he's speaking about. There actually is a nation, a country who has shown the world more than one time their determination to stand by the people. And actually just around around an hour ago, Abd al-Malik al-Houthi, the leader of the Ansarullah, had his speech right after they actually fired, and according to Yahya Sarir, the spokesperson, they carried out a successful operation there in the occupied lands. Now, we have to bring Yemen to play here. Obviously, they have restarted targeting, of course, Israel-bound vessels and carriers. Houthi just mentioned that they will stop at nothing as long as the aid flows into Gaza, and of course that their own people in Yemen are not targeted anymore. I mean, how would you describe the steadfastness of the Yemeni people and their stance with the people in Gaza?
The Yemeni people need to be saluted because they are taking the honorable position against genocide. The Abd al-Malik al-Houthi's position in here, the honorable position, remind us with internationally famous heroic figures like Che Guevara, when he took the same position against genocide happening in Africa, and when they went themselves with forces from Cuba to face that genocide in Central Africa. So the same position repeats itself with honorable people in a kind of ethical, moral background, and seeing their own people, their own Arab Muslim people being facing genocide, and as the poorest country in the Arab world taking this position. And as well, they understand as well the geopolitical game at a wider scale, Mr. Abdul Malik Houthi. If we want to look at it, the timing of this, I remember at the time of the ceasefire, and I said myself, Trump pressurized Netanyahu to accept right now, so they can go together in a bigger plan for what they call the region, changing the map in the region, the new Middle East map. And this is what is haunted the Zionist entity with creating. So the timing of the Zionist entity escalation, and as well on Gaza, and the US and UK attacks on Yemen, this is all part of the same, I see it from the same geopolitical picture. They want to create the new Middle East. They want to destroy or weaken beyond even existent the resistance in Palestine and the resistance in Yemen, especially after the ceasefire in Lebanon, and they believe they weakened Hezbollah. And the same thing, the regime change they done in Syria with bringing the Takfiri groups to take over and to Syria and to terrorize the nation. We see the massacres.
Well, Mr. Shaf, I'm going to have to cut you off. We do have a few more minutes. I do want to direct my last question to Mr. Wahlberg. Mr. Wahlberg, the U.S. has done basically everything possible and seems it will continue to do so to protect their ally Israel in the region, whether in relation to the ICC arrest warrants, the punishing and deportation of pro-Palestinian activists in the U.S. What is it that makes the U.S. basically willing to jump off the bridge for the Israeli entity?
Well, U.S. Israel, it's a kind of twins, and they're the only nations that they started with resistance. 1776 was the American Revolution, so you revolt against the colonial master. But after you revolt and you establish a government, you should dismantle your resistance movement. You don't need it anymore. But the U.S. never dismantled. It just kept building and taking over. It had to take over all of the continent. Then it moved to Philippines, and then it just expanded and expanded through the whole world. And it latched onto Israel and made Israel its extension in the Middle East. And Israel has the same mentality. We're never going to disarm. We are only going to expand and expand and expand. And that's what Israel's doing. They demand that Hamas disarm. Well, I'm sorry, but Hamas is the resistance movement. When you have got your Palestinian state, then you can expect Hamas to disarm, not before then. So that's where we stand, really. And the world understands that. The normal people and the BRICS countries and generally understand that that's how things work, but not U.S. Israel. U.S. Israel says, we're going to take over the world. And that's what the U.S. has been planning all along, and it's full speed ahead now. You've got, as my colleague mentioned, Syria, Lebanon. They were able to bomb and destroy much of Lebanon and still occupy. They're continuing to occupy. I think they will not leave unless the resistance in Lebanon pushes back.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen very much. It was a pleasure to have you both with us in this episode of Spotlight. Mr. Eric Wahlberg, author and journalist, joining us there from Toronto, and of course, Mr. Salib Shaf, author and commentator, joining us from Belfast. A pleasure. Well, viewers, thank you very much for watching this episode of Spotlight. Goodbye.